Captain Marcus Chen had survived 3 interstellar wars, 2 alien plagues, and a diplomatic incident that nearly started a galactic civil war. He had faced down Vorthan battlecruisers, negotiated with the crystalline Zephyrians, and even shared a drink with a Korthak war chief. But, standing in the pristine white corridor of a civilian transport ship, staring down at a creature that defied every xenobiological classification he knew, Marcus felt his tactical training abandon him completely. The beast was massive, easily the size of a Terran grizzly bear, but its proportions were all wrong. 6 powerful legs supported a barrel-shaped torso covered in what looked like metallic scales that shifted from deep purple to silver depending on the light. Its head was elongated, almost serpentine, with rows of crystalline teeth that caught the ship's artificial lighting and threw rainbow patterns across the walls. Most unsettling of all were its eyes, not the compound eyes of an insect or the predatory slits of a reptile, but soft, almost mammalian brown orbs that seemed to hold disturbing intelligence. "My puppy didn't eat you?" Curious, the little alien girl said calmly, as the beast showed its teeth in what Marcus desperately hoped was not preparation for a meal. The girl couldn't have been more than 8 standard years old by human reckoning, though her species was unfamiliar to Marcus. She stood barely 3 feet tall, with pale blue skin that seemed to shimmer with an inner light, and large violet eyes that dominated her delicate features. Her hair was white as starlight and moved as if suspended in water, defying the ship's artificial gravity. She wore a simple silver dress that seemed to be made of the same material as her puppy's scales. "I'm sorry," Marcus managed, his voice carefully controlled despite the adrenaline coursing through his system. "Did you just call that thing a puppy?" The girl tilted her head, studying him with those enormous eyes. "Of course. This is Kresh. He's my companion animal. Father got him for me when we left the homeworld." She reached up absently to scratch behind what Marcus assumed were the creature's ears, though they looked more like sensor arrays to his trained eye. "He usually eats anything that gets too close to me. But he seems to like you." Marcus looked at the beast again. Kresh was indeed showing no signs of aggression. If anything, the creature seemed almost curious. Its great head was tilted slightly, mirroring its young owner's pose, and Marcus could swear he saw recognition in those brown eyes. Not the simple recognition of prey or threat, but something deeper. Something that suggested this creature understood exactly what Marcus was and had made a conscious decision not to turn him into an afternoon snack. "What species is he?" Marcus asked, genuinely intrigued despite the situation. "Ithrel," the girl replied as if it were obvious. "They're from the Outer Rim worlds, beyond the Magellan Drift. Father says they're excellent judges of character." She paused, studying Marcus more intently. "You're human, aren't you? I've never seen one up close before." Marcus nodded slowly. "Captain Marcus Chen, Terran Federation Diplomatic Corps." "And you are?" "Zara." She smiled, revealing small, perfectly white teeth. "Zara Veltar of the Luminary Collective. We're traveling to the Nexus Station for the Grand Assembly." Marcus knew about the Grand Assembly. It was the most significant diplomatic gathering in over a century, bringing together representatives from dozens of species to discuss everything from trade agreements to territorial disputes. What he didn't know was why a child and her alien pet were traveling to what was essentially a military and political summit. "Are you traveling with your parents?" he asked carefully. Zara's expression grew somber. "Just with father. Mother stayed on the homeworld with my younger siblings." She brightened again. "But father says this will be educational. He says I need to learn about other species if I'm going to help lead our people someday." That explained a lot. The Luminari were known to be a highly advanced species, but they kept to themselves in the outer regions of the galaxy. If they were sending representatives to the assembly, it meant something significant was happening. And if they were bringing their future leaders' children along, it meant they were thinking long-term about galactic relations. "Well," Marcus said, relaxing slightly, "I'm honored to meet you both. I'm actually heading to the assembly myself." "Really?" Zara's eyes lit up with excitement. "What's your species' role in the galaxy?" "Father told me about humans, but he said you were a very young species." He said you've only been in space for a few hundred years. Marcus couldn't help but smile. From the perspective of species that had been spacefaring for millennia, humans were indeed newcomers. We're still learning, he admitted. But we try to contribute where we can. Kresh made a sound that was somewhere between a purr and a low growl. It was oddly comforting. He likes you, Zara repeated. That's very unusual. Kresh doesn't usually approve of strangers. Father says it's because most species have predatory intentions, even when they pretend to be civilized. She paused. But, you don't feel like a predator to him. Marcus found himself genuinely curious about this assessment. What do I feel like to him? Zara closed her eyes for a moment, and Marcus had the strange sensation that she was communicating with her companion in some way that went beyond speech. When she opened them again, she looked puzzled. He says you feel like pack, she said slowly. But that doesn't make sense. Ithrel only recognized their own species as pack. Before Marcus could respond, the ship's intercom crackled to life. Attention passengers, we will be dropping out of hyperspace in 30 minutes for a scheduled refueling stop at Waystation Beta 7. All passengers must remain in their quarters during the refueling process for safety reasons. Marcus frowned. Waystation Beta 7 wasn't on their original route to the Nexus station. It was a rough frontier outpost known more for its black market dealings than its legitimate fuel services. Any ship that stopped there was either desperate, stupid, or involved in something they shouldn't be. That's strange, Zara said, echoing his thoughts. Father said we would be traveling directly to the Nexus station. He was very specific about not making any unscheduled stops. Marcus's military instincts kicked into high gear. Where is your father now? In his quarters, preparing for the assembly. He doesn't like to be disturbed when he's working. Zara's expression grew concerned. Do you think something's wrong? Marcus was about to answer when the ship lurched violently to one side. Emergency lighting flickered on, bathing the corridor in red as the main lights failed. An alarm began blaring, and Marcus could hear the distinct whine of weapons charging somewhere in the ship's superstructure. That's definitely not refueling, Marcus muttered, his hand automatically reaching for the sidearm that wasn't there. Civilian transport ships didn't allow weapons, even for diplomatic personnel. Kresh rose to his full height, his scales shifting from purple to a threatening deep black. A low growl rumbled from his throat, and Marcus could see that the creature's muscles were tensed for action. Whatever was happening, the alien animal sensed danger. Zara, I need you to listen to me very carefully, Marcus said, dropping to one knee so he could look the girl in the eye. I think someone is trying to take control of this ship. I need you to stay close to me and do exactly what I say. Can you do that? To her credit, Zara nodded without hesitation. Should we go find Father? Yes, but carefully. And we're going to need Kresh's help. As if understanding his words, the great beast moved to position himself between Zara and the direction the attack seemed to be coming from. Marcus had to admit, having a 600-pound alien predator as backup wasn't the worst thing that could happen in a crisis. The ship lurched again, and Marcus heard the distinct sound of boarding clamps engaging against the hull. Professional pirates, then, not random raiders. They knew exactly what they were doing. This way, Marcus said, leading them down the corridor toward the passenger quarters. Stay behind Kresh and keep quiet. As they moved through the ship, Marcus's mind raced through the possibilities. The timing couldn't be coincidental, a ship carrying delegates to the most important diplomatic gathering in a century, being boarded by pirates at a remote waystation. Someone wanted to prevent the assembly from happening, or at least prevent certain delegates from arriving. The question was, were they after him, Zara's father, or someone else entirely? They reached the passenger quarters without incident, but, as they approached the door to the Luminari delegation suite, Marcus heard voices inside. Human voices, speaking in the clipped, professional tones of military operatives. Target secured. No sign of the child. Keep looking. Intelligence says she's critical to the operation. Marcus felt his blood run cold. They weren't after random delegates. They were after Zara specifically.
But why would pirates want a child, even one from an important family? Unless they weren't pirates at all.
He looked down at the girl, who was pressed close to Kresh's side, her large eyes wide with fear but still trusting. In that moment, Marcus made a decision that would change the course of not just his mission, but possibly the entire galaxy's future.
Change of plans, he whispered to Zara. We're not going to find your father right now.
We're going to find somewhere safe to hide, and then, we're going to figure out how to get off this ship.
Zara nodded,
but Marcus could see the questions in her eyes.
Why would anyone want to hurt her? What made her important enough to hijack an entire ship?
As they crept back down the corridor, with Kresh moving silently despite his massive size, Marcus began to understand that this mission was going to be nothing like the routine diplomatic transport he'd signed up for.
Whatever was happening here was bigger than pirates or even terrorists.
And, somehow, a little alien girl and her extraordinary puppy were at the center of it all. The ship shuddered again as more boarding clamps engaged. Marcus counted at least 3 different attachment points, which meant they were dealing with a coordinated assault by multiple vessels.
Professional, well-funded, and specifically targeting this ship.
As they reached a maintenance access panel, Marcus paused to look back at his unlikely companions. Zara was scared but composed, holding tightly to Kresh's scales as the massive creature scanned the corridor for threats. There was something about both of them that suggested they were far more than they appeared to be. And Marcus was beginning to suspect that before this was over, he was going to find out exactly what that something was. The hunt for the little alien girl had begun, but Marcus Chen had no intention of letting them succeed. Even if he had to fight half the galaxy to protect her. After all, that was what humans did best, protect those who couldn't protect themselves, regardless of the odds. Even if they had no idea why they were doing it. The maintenance shaft was barely wide enough for Marcus to crawl through, and he had no idea how Kresh managed to squeeze his massive bulk through the narrow opening. Yet somehow, the alien creature moved through the confined space with fluid grace, his scales shifting to match the metallic gray of the shaft walls. Zara crawled between them, her small size making navigation easier, though Marcus could see her hands trembling slightly in the emergency lighting. "Where are we going?" she whispered as they made their way through the ship's service corridors. "Engineering section," Marcus replied softly.
"If we can reach the engine room, we might be able to send a distress signal or even regain control of the ship." He paused, listening to footsteps echoing through the main corridors above them. "Can you tell me more about why you're traveling to the assembly? Your father's position in the Luminary government?"
Zara was quiet for a moment, and Marcus wondered if she was debating how much to reveal to a stranger, even one who was clearly trying to help her. "Father is the prime advisor to the Luminary Council," she said finally. "He speaks for our entire collective in matters of galactic importance.
But this assembly is different.
The other species want to discuss something called the Convergence Protocol." Marcus felt his blood chill. He'd heard whispers of the Convergence Protocol in classified briefings, but the details were above his clearance level. All he knew was that it involved some kind of galactic-scale decision that required unanimous consent from all spacefaring species.
"Do you know what the Convergence Protocol is?" he asked carefully.
"Father says it's a plan to unite all the species under a single governing authority," Zara replied.
"He says some species think it's the only way to prevent another galactic war. But the Luminary have concerns." That was putting it mildly, Marcus thought.
The Luminary were one of the oldest spacefaring species in the galaxy, with technology that bordered on the miraculous and a philosophical approach to existence that most other species found incomprehensible. The idea that they would willingly submit to any external authority was almost laughable. They reached a junction in the maintenance shaft, and Marcus paused to get his bearings. According to the ship's schematics he'd memorized during boarding, engineering should be 2 levels down and aft. But, as he prepared to continue, Kresh made a low warning sound. The alien creature's scales had shifted to a deep red, and his eyes were fixed on something behind them. Marcus strained his ears and heard the distinctive sound of cutting tools working on metal. Their pursuers had found the access panel they'd used to enter the maintenance system.
"They're following us," Marcus whispered. "We need to move faster."
But, as they pressed forward, Marcus realized they had another problem. The maintenance shaft ahead was flooded with some kind of gas that his suit sensors identified as a paralytic agent. Their pursuers weren't just following them, they were forcing them into a trap.
Can Kresh handle whatever that is?
Marcus asked, nodding toward the gas cloud. Zara closed her eyes again, and Marcus saw that same strange communication passing between her and her companion. When she opened them, she looked troubled. He says it won't hurt him, but it will affect us. His species has natural immunities to most toxins. She paused. He also says there are armed humans waiting at the other end of this passage.
Marcus cursed under his breath. Professional military operation, no doubt about it. They'd planned for every contingency, including the possibility that their targets would try to escape through the service corridors.
Can Kresh carry us? He asked.
Zara nodded. He's much stronger than he looks.
But, Marcus.
She hesitated. He's also much more dangerous than he looks. If he carries us past those armed humans, people are going to get hurt.
Marcus studied the massive alien creature. Kresh's eyes met his, and, for a moment, Marcus felt as if the alien animal was waiting for permission to do what came naturally to his species. The way Zara had described it earlier came back to him. Kresh usually ate anything that got too close to his young charge.
How dangerous? Marcus asked quietly. Ithrel are apex predators on their homeworld, Zara explained.
They hunt in packs and can take down prey 10 times their size. Kresh is actually small for his species. And he's been trained as a guardian, not just a companion. Marcus made his decision quickly.
Zara, I need you to understand something. The people who have taken this ship aren't pirates.
They're military operatives, and they're specifically after you. I don't know why, but they've planned this operation very carefully. He looked into her large violet eyes. If we're going to get out of this alive, Kresh is going to have to do what he was bred to do.
Zara nodded solemnly. I understand. Kresh understands too.
She placed a small hand on the creature's scaled hide. He says he's been waiting for permission since this started. What happened next would stay with Marcus for the rest of his life.
Kresh's transformation was immediate and terrifying.
His scales shifted to pure black, and his body seemed to expand, muscles bunching beneath his hide. When he opened his mouth, Marcus could see that his crystalline teeth were actually retractable, and the creature's full dental display was far more impressive than anything he'd shown earlier. Most disturbing of all was the intelligence in his eyes. This wasn't a mindless predator, but a thinking, calculating killer who understood exactly what he was about to do. The alien creature gathered both Marcus and Zara onto his back, securing them with careful movements of his powerful limbs. Then, without warning, he launched himself forward into the gas cloud. Marcus felt the paralytic agent trying to work on his nervous system, but Kresh was moving so fast that they were through the cloud and into clear air before the chemical could take full effect. Behind them, he heard shouts of alarm as their pursuers realized what was happening. They burst out of the maintenance shaft into a cargo bay where 6 armed operatives were waiting in tactical positions. Marcus recognized their gear immediately, Terran Federation Special Forces equipment, but without unit insignia. Black Ops, then, probably hired mercenaries rather than official military. Kresh hit the deck running and immediately proved why his species had evolved to be apex predators. The first operative never had a chance to bring his weapon to bear before 600 pounds of alien muscle and fury slammed into him. Marcus heard the distinctive crack of breaking bones, followed by a scream that cut off abruptly. The second operative managed to fire a burst from his plasma rifle, but Kresh was already moving, his impossible agility allowing him to change direction mid-leap. What followed wasn't a battle so much as a demonstration of why humans had spent millennia being afraid of large predators. Kresh moved through the remaining operatives like a force of nature, his crystalline teeth and powerful claws making short work of their body armor. The operatives were well-trained professionals, but they'd been prepared to face human opponents, not a creature that combined the intelligence of a dolphin with the killing power of a prehistoric apex predator.
The entire engagement lasted less than 30 seconds.
When it was over, Kresh stood in the center of the cargo bay, his scales slowly shifting back to their normal purple color. He was breathing heavily but showed no signs of injury, despite the fact that several of the operatives had managed to land hits with their energy weapons.
How is he not hurt?
Marcus asked, sliding down from the creature's back.
Ethereal scales aren't just armor, Zara explained, dismounting with practiced ease. They can absorb and redistribute energy. It's one of the reasons Father chose Kresh for me.
Very few weapons in the galaxy can actually harm a fully grown Ethereal. Marcus looked around at the cargo bay, taking stock of their situation. They'd neutralized the immediate threat, but he could hear reinforcements moving through the ship's corridors.
More importantly, they still didn't know who was behind the operation or why they wanted Zara.
We need to reach the communication array, he decided. If we can send a distress signal to the Terran Federation or the Luminari Collective, we might be able to get help. But, as they prepared to leave the cargo bay, Marcus heard something that made his tactical training scream warnings. The sound of heavy boots moving in perfect synchronization, accompanied by the mechanical whir of powered armor.
They brought mechs, he muttered. Professional-grade combat suits. Zara looked confused. Mechs? Powered combat armor. Basically, it turns a single soldier into a walking tank.
Marcus studied their surroundings, looking for alternative routes.
Even Kresh won't be able to handle armored opponents in an open fight. As if summoned by his words, the cargo bay's main doors exploded inward, revealing 3 figures in gleaming silver combat suits.
Each suit stood over 7 feet tall and bristled with weapon systems that could level a small building. The helmet displays showed no identifying marks, but Marcus could see targeting lasers already painting red dots across the bay. Target acquired, a mechanically distorted voice announced. Surrender the Luminari subject and you will not be harmed. Marcus stepped in front of Zara, though he knew it was a futile gesture.
Who are you working for? He called out. What do you want with the girl? That information is classified, the lead mech responded. You have 10 seconds to comply. Marcus felt Zara's small hand slip into his. They're going to kill you anyway, she whispered.
Kresh can sense their intentions. The alien creature was indeed showing signs of extreme agitation, his scales cycling through angry reds and threatening blacks. But Marcus could also see the creature's intelligence at work. Kresh was studying the mechs, calculating angles and distances, looking for weaknesses in their armor.
What's he thinking? Marcus asked quietly.
Zara closed her eyes briefly. He says their suits are well designed, but they're built for fighting humans. They're too slow to track a Ethereal, and their joints are vulnerable to his claws. Time's up, the lead mech announced, raising a weapon that looked capable of vaporizing half the cargo bay.
That's when Marcus learned something new about human Ethereal cooperation.
Kresh launched himself not at the mechs, but at the cargo bay's structural supports. His claws, which Marcus now realized were far sharper than he'd initially thought, sliced through metal support beams like they were made of paper. The bay's artificial gravity generator, damaged by the creature's assault on the ship's infrastructure, began to fluctuate wildly. In the chaos that followed, with debris floating in random directions and the mechs struggling to maintain their footing, Marcus grabbed Zara and followed Kresh through an emergency bulkhead that led deeper into the ship. As they fled through the corridors, with the sound of pursuit echoing behind them, Marcus began to understand that this situation was far more complex than a simple kidnapping attempt. The resources being deployed to capture one alien child suggested that Zara was important to someone in ways that went far beyond her father's political position. Zara, he said as they paused at another junction, is there anything else about yourself or your family that might make someone want to capture you? Anything that makes you different from other Luminari children? Zara exchanged a look with Kresh that Marcus was beginning to recognize as their silent communication method.
Father says I'm not supposed to tell anyone until after the assembly, she said slowly. But I think that might not matter anymore. Tell me. I'm not just Father's daughter, Zara said quietly. I'm his successor. But not just as prime advisor to the council. According to our traditions, I'm the next speaker for the light. Marcus felt his world shift. The speaker for the light wasn't just a political position among the Luminari,
it was a mystical role that supposedly gave its holder the ability to communicate directly with the quantum consciousness that guided Luminari civilization.
If that was true, then Zara wasn't just the child of a diplomat.
She was potentially the most powerful being in the galaxy. And someone was willing to start a war to capture her. The revelation about Zara's true identity changed everything Marcus thought he knew about their situation. As they moved through the ship's lower levels, avoiding the systematic search being conducted by their pursuers, Marcus's mind raced through the implications. The Speaker for the Light wasn't just a political figure. According to galactic legend, they were the living interface between the Luminari collective consciousness and the physical universe.
If Zara truly was destined for that role, then controlling her would mean controlling one of the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy. How long have you known about your destiny?
Marcus asked quietly as they paused in a service corridor, listening to the sound of search teams moving through adjacent sections. Since I was very young, Zara replied, unconsciously stroking Kresh's scales as the massive creature kept watch.
The light spoke to me even before Father formally recognized my potential.
It's why he chose Kresh as my guardian. Ithrel have a natural sensitivity to quantum consciousness fields. They can sense when someone has the potential to speak her.
Marcus looked at the alien predator with new understanding. That's why he recognized me as Pac, isn't it? He can sense something about humans that even we don't fully understand. Zara nodded.
Kresh says humans have something unique among all the spacefaring species. You don't just adapt to new situations, you change them. Most species evolve to fit their environment, but humans evolve their environment to fit them. It creates a kind of quantum resonance that Ithrel find comforting.
Before Marcus could fully process this information, Kresh's scales shifted to warning red.
The creature's head tilted, listening to something beyond human hearing. Then, he moved to position himself between Zara and the corridor behind them. They've found our trail, Marcus realized.
How many?
Zara placed her hand on Kresh's hide, her expression growing distant as she communicated with her guardian. 8 in powered armor, plus support teams.
They're sealing off this section of the ship.
Marcus checked his mental map of the vessel. They were trapped in the lower engineering levels, with limited options for escape. The cargo bays were sealed, the shuttle bay was certainly under enemy control, and the main corridors were being systematically cleared by professional soldiers. There might be another option, he said slowly.
Emergency escape pods.
Most ships this size have them scattered throughout the engineering sections for catastrophic evacuation scenarios.
Could an escape pod reach a friendly ship? Zara asked. Maybe.
But there's a bigger problem. Most pods are designed for single occupancy. I'm not sure one could handle both of us and Kresh. Kresh made a sound that was somehow both a growl and a purr. Zara listened to whatever he was communicating, then shook her head firmly. He says he can survive in vacuum for a short time. His species evolved on a world with very thin atmosphere.
But he won't leave us.
Marcus was about to respond when the ship's intercom system crackled to life with a voice he didn't recognize, cold, professional, and utterly without emotion. Attention, Marcus Chen of the Terran Federation.
We know you have the Luminari child. We also know you're trapped in the engineering section. We're prepared to offer you a deal.
Marcus said nothing, but he saw Zara's eyes widen with fear.
You're a career diplomat, Chen.
Your psychological profile suggests you're motivated by duty and the greater good. Consider this, the child you're protecting is destined to become one of the most powerful beings in the galaxy. In the wrong hands, that power could destabilize everything humanity has worked to build among the stars. The voice paused, letting that sink in. But, in the right hands, guided by wisdom and restraint, that same power could ensure peace and prosperity for all species.
We represent certain elements within the galactic community who believe the Luminari cannot be trusted with such responsibility.
Their isolationist tendencies and incomprehensible philosophy make them unreliable partners in maintaining galactic stability.
Marcus felt anger building in his chest. What exactly are you proposing? He called out.
Surrender the child to us.
We will ensure she receives proper guidance and education.
In exchange, humanity will be granted preferred status in the new galactic order that's emerging. Your species will have significant influence over policy and resource allocation.
And if I refuse?
Then, you'll die defending someone whose power you can't even comprehend, and humanity will be excluded from the decisions that will shape the galaxy's future. Marcus looked down at Zara, who was listening to this exchange with the composure of someone far older than her apparent years. "What do you think?" he asked her quietly.
"Father always said that humans were unique among the spacefaring species because you choose principles over advantage," she replied.
He said it made you unpredictable, but also trustworthy in ways that other species couldn't understand.
"And what does the light tell you?"
Zara's expression grew distant, and Marcus had the strange sensation that she was consulting something vast and incomprehensible. When she focused on him again, her violet eyes held depths that seemed far too old for her small face. "The light says that the path forward is unclear, but that some choices create more possibilities than others.
Surrendering to these people would close many paths that should remain open." She paused.
"It also says that humans have a role to play in what's coming, but only if you remain true to your nature." Marcus made his decision. "Then, we find another way out of this." The intercom crackled again.
"Your time is up, Chin. We're moving in." Kresh's scale shifted to pure black as the sound of approaching footsteps echoed through the corridors.
But, instead of preparing for another fight, the alien creature did something unexpected. He moved to the nearest bulkhead and began examining the metal with intense concentration.
"What's he doing?" Marcus asked.
"He's reading the quantum signature of the ship's structure," Zara explained.
"Ithrel can sense weak points in materials at the molecular level."
Suddenly, Kresh began clawing at a specific section of the bulkhead. His crystalline talons sliced through the metal as if it were soft plastic, revealing a hidden space behind the wall.
"Smuggler's compartment," Marcus realized. "This ship has been modified."
They squeezed through the opening just as the first powered armor unit rounded the corner. The hidden space was cramped but large enough for all three of them, and, more importantly, it seemed to extend further into the ship's structure. As they moved through what was clearly a network of concealed passages, Marcus began to understand that their transport ship was not what it appeared to be. The modifications were extensive and professional, designed to hide both cargo and passengers from official scrutiny.
"Do you think Father knew about these passages?"
Zara whispered. "I think your father knew exactly what kind of ship he was booking passage on," Marcus replied. "The question is whether he expected trouble, or if he was planning to use these passages for something else." They emerged from the hidden network into what appeared to be a concealed cargo bay. The space was filled with equipment that Marcus didn't immediately recognize, though it had the look of advanced technology. At the far end of the bay, almost hidden in the shadows, was something that made his heart leap with hope, a small but modern shuttle craft.
"Emergency transport," he breathed. "Your father was definitely expecting trouble."
But, as they approached the shuttle, Marcus heard a new sound that made his blood run cold, the distinctive whine of the ship's main engines powering down. They were dropping out of hyperspace, which meant they'd reached whatever destination their captors had planned. "We need to move fast," he said, beginning his pre-flight checks on the shuttle. "Once they dock with whatever ship is waiting for them, our chances of escape drop to zero." The shuttle's systems were unlike anything Marcus had ever seen. The interface was clearly Luminary in design, with holographic controls that responded to touch and thought in equal measure. But, as he tried to initialize the launch sequence, he realized he was completely out of his depth.
"I can't operate Luminary technology," he admitted.
"I can," Zara said, moving to the pilot's position.
"Father has been teaching me."
Marcus watched in amazement as the 8-year-old girl's hands moved over controls that seemed to respond to her presence before she even touched them. The shuttle's engines came online with a whisper-quiet hum that spoke of technology far in advance of anything humanity had developed.
"Can Kresh fit?"
Marcus asked, eyeing the shuttle's compact interior. In response, the massive alien creature seemed to compress himself, folding his limbs in ways that shouldn't have been anatomically possible. Within moments, he'd arranged himself in the shuttle's cargo area with room to spare.
"Ithrel are more flexible than they appear," Zara explained as she completed the launch sequence. It's an adaptation from their homeworld's cave systems.
The shuttle's sensors showed that the main ship was indeed docking with a much larger vessel, a military-grade cruiser that Marcus's training allowed him to identify as modified consortium technology. The consortium was a loose alliance of species that often worked as mercenaries for the highest bidder. If they were involved, then, whoever was behind this operation had serious funding and connections. Launch bay is sealed, Marcus reported, studying the shuttle's tactical display.
But your father's ship has some interesting modifications here too.
Zara's hands moved over the controls, and Marcus felt the shuttle lift off from the concealed bay. But, instead of heading for the sealed launch doors, the craft moved toward what appeared to be solid bulkhead.
Emergency exit, Zara explained. Father's ship can create temporary openings in its hull structure. Luminary technology is very good at molecular manipulation.
The bulkhead ahead of them simply dissolved, creating an opening just large enough for the shuttle to pass through. As they shot out into space, Marcus could see the full scope of what they were facing. The transport ship was docked with a consortium heavy cruiser, and there were at least 2 more ships visible on the sensors, forming a net that should have prevented any escape.
How are we getting past them? Marcus asked. Zara's answer sent chills down his spine. We're not running away. We're going to the Nexus station to warn the assembly. Zara, those ships will catch us long before we reach the Nexus. Not if we take the Luminary route.
Before Marcus could ask what that meant, the space around their shuttle began to twist and bend in ways that hurt to look at directly. The stars stretched into lines, then spirals, then patterns that seemed to exist in more dimensions than human minds could process. When the distortion cleared, they were no longer in the same star system.
What just happened? Marcus asked weakly. Luminary ships don't use hyperspace like other species, Zara explained.
We fold spacetime directly. It's much faster, but it requires a quantum consciousness interface to navigate.
Marcus looked at the young girl with new respect. You just piloted us through a spacetime fold? The light helped, Zara said simply. It knows the way to the Nexus station.
As their destination appeared on the sensors, the massive diplomatic station that was hosting the Grand Assembly, Marcus realized that their escape was only the beginning of their problems. Whoever had tried to capture Zara was clearly working with significant resources and political backing. Their operation would have backups and contingencies. And, now that they knew Zara could access the power of the light directly, they would be even more desperate to capture her. The real battle was just beginning. The Nexus station hung in space like an artificial planet, its massive bulk dwarfing even the largest military vessels that orbited it. The station was a marvel of cooperative engineering, built over centuries by dozens of species working together to create a neutral ground where galactic diplomacy could flourish. As their shuttle approached the docking bays, Marcus could see representatives from across the galaxy arriving for the Grand Assembly.
But something was wrong. Those aren't diplomatic vessels, Marcus observed, studying the sensor readings. Half the ships in the orbital pattern are military.
Zara was focused on the navigation console, her young features creased with concentration as she guided their stolen shuttle through the traffic control patterns.
Father said the assembly would be different this time.
He said some species were bringing security forces because they were afraid of what might be decided. Kresh made a low rumbling sound that Marcus had learned to interpret as unease. The massive alien creature was pressed against one of the shuttle's viewports, his brown eyes fixed on the station with obvious concern.
What's bothering him? Marcus asked.
Zara paused in her piloting to place a hand on Kresh's scaled hide.
He says the quantum resonance around the station feels wrong.
Like there are too many different kinds of consciousness trying to exist in the same space.
Marcus thought about that.
The Nexus station was designed to accommodate hundreds of different species, each with their own environmental and psychological needs.
But, if someone was planning to disrupt the assembly, the station's diversity could become a vulnerability rather than a strength. Zara, when we dock, I need you to stay close to me and Kresh.
Don't talk to anyone except official station personnel, and, even then, be careful about what you say. Marcus checked the shuttle's communication system.
First thing we need to do is contact your father and the Luminary delegation. Father's delegation has quarters in the High Council section, Zara said. But, Marcus, what if the people who tried to capture me have allies on the station? What if they're expecting us to come here? It was a sobering thought. The operation to capture Zara had been too well planned to be an isolated incident.
If there was a conspiracy to control or eliminate the Luminary delegation, it almost certainly extended to the Nexus station itself.
Then, we'll deal with that when we have to, Marcus decided. But, we can't let them succeed in preventing the assembly.
Whatever the convergence protocol really involves, it's important enough that someone is willing to commit acts of war to control it. Their shuttle was cleared for docking at Bay 7, which Marcus noted was in a relatively isolated section of the station. As they went through the landing sequence, he found himself studying the other vessels in their immediate area. Most were civilian transports and diplomatic ships, but there were enough private vessels to make him nervous. Stay alert, he warned as they prepared to disembark.
If someone is waiting for us, this is where they'll make their move.
The docking bay appeared normal as they stepped off the shuttle.
Station personnel in their distinctive blue uniforms were going about their duties with professional efficiency.
But Kresh's scales had shifted to a wary orange, and Marcus could see the creature's muscles tensed beneath his hide.
"Welcome to Nexus Station," a human voice called out.
Marcus turned to see a woman in station administrator clothing approaching them. She was middle-aged, with the kind of confident bearing that suggested significant authority.
"I'm Deputy Administrator Sarah Chan. We weren't expecting any arrivals from the Luminary delegation."
Marcus felt a chill at hearing his own surname, but he kept his expression neutral. "Captain Marcus Chen, Terran Federation Diplomatic Corps. This is Zara Veltar of the Luminary Collective, and her guardian." He gestured to Kresh, who was studying the administrator with obvious suspicion.
"Chen?" The woman's eyebrows rose. "That's interesting. We don't get many Terrans with administrative positions here. Are you any relation to the diplomatic Chen family?"
Warning bells were going off in Marcus's head, but he couldn't put his finger on exactly why.
"No immediate family in administration. We need to contact the Luminary delegation immediately. There's been an incident involving their transport vessel." "Of course," Administrator Chen said smoothly. "If you'll follow me, I'll escort you to the High Council section. Security protocols require that all new arrivals be processed through official channels." As they walked through the station's corridors, Marcus noticed several things that made him increasingly uneasy. First, there were far more security personnel visible than he would have expected for a diplomatic gathering. Second, many of them were human, which was unusual given that the Nexus station typically employed a diverse mix of species for security duties. Most troubling of all, Kresh's agitation was increasing with every step they took. "Tell me about the incident with the Luminary transport," Administrator Chen said as they walked. "Was it a mechanical failure?" "Pirates," Marcus lied smoothly. "They disabled the ship and attempted to board, but we managed to escape in an emergency shuttle." "How fortunate," the administrator replied. "Pirates have become increasingly bold recently. We've had several reports of attacks on diplomatic vessels." They reached a transport pod that would take them to the High Council section, but, as they prepared to board, Kresh suddenly moved to block their path. The massive creature's scales had shifted to deep red, and his lips were pulled back to reveal those crystalline teeth. "Is there a problem with your guardian?" Administrator Chen asked, her hand moving casually towards something at her belt. Zara placed both hands on Kresh's hide, and Marcus could see her concentrating intensely. When she opened her eyes, her expression was grim. "He says you're lying about something," she told the administrator. "He says your quantum signature doesn't match your words." Administrator Chen's friendly expression didn't change, but Marcus caught the subtle shift in her body language that indicated someone preparing for action. His diplomatic training had included extensive instruction in reading body language across species, and the signs were universal. "That's very interesting," Chen said. "I've heard that Ithrel have unusual sensory capabilities, but I've never seen it demonstrated." She smiled, but
the expression never reached her eyes.
Perhaps we should discuss this in a more private setting.
Marcus was already moving when the administrator's hand completed its journey to her belt. The weapon she drew was compact but clearly military grade, and Marcus recognized it as a neural disruptor designed to incapacitate without killing. But Kresh was faster than either human. The massive alien creature launched himself at Administrator Chen with the fluid grace of a natural predator. His claws extended, slashing the neural disruptor from her hand before she could fire. A second later, 600 pounds of alien muscle had pinned her to the floor.
"Don't move," Marcus warned as other station personnel began to converge on their position. "Kresh doesn't usually give people second chances."
"You don't understand," Chen gasped from beneath the creature's weight. "The Luminary delegation is in danger."
"We're trying to help them. By lying to us and drawing weapons?"
Marcus kept his voice level, but he was rapidly calculating their options. They were trapped in a public area with hostile forces closing in from multiple directions. "The conspiracy goes deeper than you know," Chen continued. "There are elements within the station administration who have been compromised. I was trying to get you to safety before they realize you're here."
"Why should we believe you?" Zara asked.
"Because your father sent me a message 3 hours ago, warning that his transport had been compromised and asking me to watch for survivors."
Chen's expression was desperate but somehow more genuine than her earlier friendliness. "My full name is Sarah Chunvaldris.
I'm not just a station administrator, I'm an undercover operative for the Terran Federation Intelligence Service."
Marcus felt the pieces clicking into place.
Chunvaldris was a name he recognized from classified briefings, a deep cover agent who'd been investigating suspected conspiracy activities within the galactic diplomatic community.
"Prove it," he demanded.
Chunvaldris spoke a code phrase that only someone with access to the highest levels of Terran Federation intelligence would know. Marcus felt some of his tension ease, but he kept his guard up. "Kresh, let her up," Zara said quietly.
"But stay ready."
The massive creature stepped back, allowing the agent to regain her feet. But his scales remained warning red, and Marcus could see that he was still prepared for immediate action. "The Luminary delegation was evacuated from their official quarters 2 hours ago," Chunvaldris explained quickly. "We detected listening devices and potential threat vectors. They're currently in a secure facility in the station's core section, but I'm not sure how long we can keep them safe."
"Who's behind the conspiracy?" Marcus asked. "That's what we're trying to determine. We know it involves high-ranking members of at least 3 different species governments, plus significant financial backing from off-world corporate interests.
But the goal seems to be preventing the convergence protocol from being implemented."
Zara stepped forward. "What exactly is the convergence protocol?" Chunvaldris looked at the young girl with something like sympathy.
"It's a proposed merger of all spacefaring species into a single galactic government, with shared technology and resources. The Luminary would provide the quantum consciousness interface technology that would make such a merger possible on a practical level."
"And someone doesn't want that to happen," Marcus concluded. "Several someones, actually.
The protocol would eliminate many of the power structures that currently exist. No more independent military forces, no more territorial disputes, no more trade wars." Chunvaldris gestured around them at the station.
"Some very powerful people would lose a great deal of influence if the galaxy united under a single authority." "Including humans?" Marcus asked. "Especially humans, in some ways.
Humanity has been very successful playing the various species against each other, gaining advantages through careful diplomacy and strategic alliances. A unified galaxy would require us to give up those advantages in exchange for equality." Marcus thought about the conversation he'd had with Zara about humans being unique among spacefaring species.
Perhaps that uniqueness was exactly what made some people afraid of the convergence protocol.
"We need to reach the Luminary delegation," he decided. "If Zara is truly destined to become the next speaker for the light, then her father needs to know she's safe." But as they prepared to move deeper into the station, alarms began blaring throughout the facility. Emergency lighting activated, and Marcus could hear the distinctive sound of blast doors sealing throughout the complex.
Lockdown protocol, Chanvaldris said grimly. Someone has just declared a security emergency.
On screens throughout the corridor, an official announcement began playing. The speaker was of Vorthan in formal diplomatic regalia, and Marcus recognized him as one of the senior assembly coordinators.
Attention all station personnel and diplomatic guests. We have received credible intelligence that terrorist elements have infiltrated the station with the intention of disrupting the Grand Assembly. All personnel are to remain in their current locations while security teams conduct a comprehensive sweep of the facility. Marcus looked at Chanvaldris. How much do you want to bet that terrorist elements means us?
No bet, she replied. And I'm guessing the security teams conducting the sweep aren't working for station administration. Kresh made that rumbling sound again, and this time Marcus could hear actual anger in it. The massive creature was staring at the security cameras that were tracking their movement through the corridor.
He says we're being hunted, Zara translated.
And that the hunters are getting closer. Marcus made a decision that would either save them all or get them killed. Then, we stop running and start hunting them back. It's time these people learned what humans do when you threaten someone under our protection. Chanvaldris smiled for the first time since they'd met her.
Now you're talking my language.
As station security forces moved to intercept them, Marcus realized that the real battle for the galaxy's future was about to begin. And, somehow, it was going to be decided by a human diplomat, an undercover agent, a little alien girl, and her very dangerous puppy. The galaxy was about to learn why humanity had earned its reputation as the species that never knew when to quit. The battle for Nexus Station began in the maintenance corridors, where Marcus had led their small group to avoid the security sweeps. Chanvaldris proved to be as capable as her reputation suggested, producing weapons and equipment from hidden caches throughout the station. But it was Kresh who turned the tide of their individual engagements, moving through the confined spaces with deadly efficiency. Status report, Marcus called out as they regrouped in a service junction after neutralizing another security patrol. The bodies around them wore official station uniforms, but their equipment was military-grade and bore no identifying marks. Luminary delegation is still secure in the core section, Chanvaldris reported, checking her encrypted communicator.
But they're running out of time.
The conspirators have introduced a motion to suspend the assembly due to security concerns.
If it passes, they can delay the convergence protocol vote indefinitely. How long do we have? Zara asked. Despite everything they'd been through, the young girl seemed remarkably composed.
Her connection to Kresh had only grown stronger under stress, and Marcus could see her confidence growing as she learned to trust her guardian's abilities.
Maybe 2 hours before the emergency vote, Chanvaldris replied. But that's if we can even reach the assembly chamber.
The entire station is locked down, and they've positioned heavy security at every checkpoint between us and the diplomatic sections. Marcus studied the station schematics that Chanvaldris had loaded onto her portable display. The Nexus station was massive, with multiple redundant systems and security layers. But he'd spent his career finding diplomatic solutions to impossible problems, and this was just another puzzle to solve. What if we don't try to reach the assembly chamber, he suggested.
What if we bring the assembly to us? Explain, Chanvaldris said.
The station's main communication array can broadcast to every screen and speaker in the facility. If Zara can demonstrate her abilities as the speaker for the light, she can show the delegates exactly what's at stake with the convergence protocol.
Zara looked uncertain. I've never tried to use the light with so many different species present. The quantum resonance patterns might be incompatible. But you won't know until you try, Marcus pointed out. And, right now, it might be our only option. Kresh made a sound that was somewhere between approval and concern. When Zara placed her hand on his scales, Marcus could see the silent communication passing between them. He says the risk is significant, Zara translated. Using the light in front of species that don't understand it could create complications. But, he also says that the alternative is worse. If the convergence protocol fails,
the galaxy will eventually tear itself apart through conflict and competition. Chanvaldris was already plotting a route to the communication center. It's heavily guarded, but there might be a way to approach through the power distribution network. The conspirators wouldn't expect us to risk exposure to the station's main power conduits.
How much exposure are we talking about? Marcus asked. Enough to kill unprotected humans in about 30 seconds, Chanvaldris admitted.
But, if we can shield ourselves with the right equipment.
Ithrel can withstand much higher energy levels than humans, Zara said thoughtfully.
Kresh could carry us through the dangerous sections. Marcus looked at the massive alien creature, who seemed to understand their conversation despite the language barriers.
Are you sure he can protect all three of us?
He says he can, but there's another problem, Zara replied after consulting with her guardian. The communication center is at the heart of the station's quantum consciousness network. If I try to use the light there, every psychically sensitive species on the station will feel it. That includes some species that might not react well to that kind of direct quantum contact. Define not react well, Marcus requested. Panic, madness, or potentially aggressive responses, Chanvaldris answered. Some species experience quantum consciousness contact as a form of mental intrusion. It's one of the reasons the Luminari have been so careful about how they interact with other civilizations.
Marcus weighed their options.
They could try to fight their way through the station's security forces, but that would likely take hours they didn't have. They could attempt to reach the Luminari delegation directly, but that would still leave the conspirators in control of the assembly proceedings. Or they could take the risk of exposing Zara's abilities to the entire station, with all the unpredictable consequences that might follow.
What does the light tell you? He asked Zara.
The girl closed her eyes, and Marcus felt something shift in the air around them. For just a moment, he could sense the vast intelligence that Zara was communing with, ancient, patient, and utterly inhuman in its perspective. The light says that some paths forward require great risk to achieve great reward, Zara said when she opened her eyes. It also says that humans have a role to play in what comes next, but only if you're willing to trust something beyond your understanding. Marcus made his decision with the same instinctive certainty that had guided him through his most successful diplomatic negotiations.
Then, we do it.
We get to the communication center, and you show the galaxy what the convergence protocol really means. The journey through the power distribution network was like traveling through the circulatory system of a mechanical god. Massive conduits carried energy flows that could power small cities, while quantum field generators hummed with barely contained forces. Kresh moved through the dangerous environment with careful precision, his scales providing protection not just from physical damage but from the electromagnetic fields that would have fried human nervous systems in seconds.
Marcus found himself impressed once again by the alien creature's intelligence.
Kresh wasn't just protecting them from the energy discharges, he was actually using the quantum fields to mask their movement from the station's sensors.
How much farther? Chanvaldris asked through their calm system.
Almost there, Marcus replied, checking their position against the schematics.
But we're going to have company when we arrive. I'm reading at least 12 security personnel in the communication center.
Leave them to Kresh and me, Zara said with quiet confidence.
You and Agent Chanvaldris focus on accessing the broadcast system.
They emerged from the power network into the communication center through a maintenance access panel. The space was larger than Marcus had expected, filled with advanced technology that hummed with barely audible quantum resonances. At the center of the room was a raised platform surrounded by holographic displays and control interfaces.
The security personnel were indeed waiting for them, positioned with professional precision around the room.
But they'd made the mistake that most beings made when facing an unknown threat. They'd prepared for what they expected, not for what they were actually dealing with. Kresh entered the room like a force of nature, his scales shifting through the electromagnetic spectrum as he absorbed and redirected the energy weapons being fired at him. The security personnel were well trained, but they'd never faced a predator that could turn their own weapons against them. What followed wasn't a battle so much as a demonstration of why the Ithrel had never been successfully conquered by any other species. Kresh moved through the security team with fluid grace, his crystalline claws cutting through their armor as if it were paper.
But Marcus noticed something interesting. Despite his obvious killing ability, the alien creature was being careful not to inflict fatal wounds when he could avoid it. He's holding back, Marcus realized. Kresh says there's been enough death already, Zara explained as she moved toward the central platform. He only kills when there's no other option. With the security threat neutralized, Chanvaldris quickly accessed the station's communication system. I'm patched into the main broadcast network, she reported. But, you should know that as soon as you start transmitting, every hostile force on the station is going to converge on this location. How long can you hold them off? Marcus asked. Long enough, Chanvaldris replied with grim determination. But, this better work, because we're not getting a second chance. Zara stepped onto the central platform, and immediately the room's quantum field generators began resonating with her presence. The holographic displays flickered and shifted, showing patterns that Marcus's human eyes couldn't quite process but somehow found beautiful. Remember, Marcus said, you're not just talking to the Luminary delegation. You're addressing representatives from dozens of species, each with their own understanding of consciousness and reality. Make them understand what the convergence protocol really means. Zara nodded, then placed both hands on the platform's control interface. The quantum resonance in the room intensified until Marcus could feel it in his bones. When she spoke, her voice was carried not just by the station's communication system, but by something far more fundamental. Every screen in Nexus Station flickered to life, showing the image of a young Luminary girl surrounded by patterns of light that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. People of the galaxy, Zara began, her voice somehow speaking in every language at once. I am Zara Veltar, speaker for the light of the Luminary Collective. I speak to you now not as a child, but as the voice of something ancient and patient that has watched civilizations rise and fall among the stars. The response was immediate and dramatic. Throughout the station, representatives from dozens of species found themselves experiencing direct quantum consciousness contact for the first time. For some, it was revelation. For others, it was terrifying. But, for all of them, it was undeniably real. The convergence protocol is not about political control or economic advantage, Zara continued, her image surrounded by swirling patterns of quantum energy. It is about evolution. The next step in the development of consciousness itself. Individual species have reached the limits of what they can achieve alone. Only by joining together, sharing not just technology and resources but consciousness itself, can we become something greater. Marcus watched the security monitors as the station's population reacted to Zara's broadcast. Some species were gathering in groups, drawn together by the quantum resonance. Others were retreating to their quarters, overwhelmed by the experience. But none of them could ignore what was happening. I know that many of you fear what you don't understand, Zara's voice continued. You see the Luminary as mysterious and potentially dangerous. But we are not trying to control you. We are offering to share with you the greatest gift in the universe, true unity of purpose and consciousness. The communication center's doors burst open as hostile security forces attempted to storm the room. But they found their way blocked by something impossible, delegations from a dozen different species, led by Zara's own father, who had somehow reached them despite the station lockdown. Father! Zara called out, her connection to the light faltering for a moment as she saw the tall, elegant figure of the Luminary Prime Advisor. Continue, my daughter, he said in the musical tones of his species. They need to hear what you have to say. With renewed confidence, Zara turned back to the quantum interface. The convergence protocol will not eliminate individual species or cultures. It will enhance them, allowing each civilization to contribute their unique perspective to a greater whole. Humans will bring their adaptability and courage. Vorthans will contribute their analytical precision. Zephyrians will share their artistic vision. Every species has something irreplaceable to offer. The patterns of light around her began to coalesce into recognizable forms, images of different species working together, sharing knowledge and consciousness in ways that enhanced rather than diminished their individual natures. But the choice must be made freely, Zara concluded. No species can be forced into convergence. It must be a willing union, based on trust and mutual respect.
That is why we have come to you now, in this moment of crisis, to show you what is possible when consciousness chooses unity over conflict. As her voice faded, the quantum resonance in the room slowly diminished. But Marcus could see that its effects were lasting. Throughout the station, species that had never truly understood each other were beginning to communicate in ways that transcended language. "The assembly will reconvene in 1 hour," came an announcement over the station's general communication system. "All delegates are requested to return to the main chamber for a formal vote on the convergence protocol." Marcus looked around the communication center at their unlikely alliance: a human diplomat, an undercover agent, a luminary child, her alien guardian, and representatives from across the galaxy who had risked everything to ensure that the truth was heard. "Do you think it worked?" he asked Zara's father. The luminary prime advisor's expression was unreadable, but there was something like hope in his ancient eyes. "My daughter has shown them what is possible," he replied. "Now we must trust that they will choose wisely." As they prepared to escort Zara to the assembly chamber, Marcus realized that regardless of how the vote went, something fundamental had changed. The galaxy had seen what true unity could look like, and that vision would not be easily forgotten. Whether the convergence protocol passed or failed, the seeds of something greater had been planted. And, sometimes, that was enough to change everything. Crash made a sound that Marcus had learned to interpret as satisfaction. The massive alien creature seemed to understand that his young charge had just taken the first step toward fulfilling her destiny. The future was uncertain, but, for the first time since this crisis began, Marcus felt genuinely hopeful about what that future might hold.